我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
早上起床刷了刷牙，衣服还没换，吹吹头发拍了脸颊，阿看已经9点半，拿起手机上了速梯，戴起耳机要等捷运，我飞奔冲过狗洞，坐上拥挤的电梯，怎么每天早八都在夜曲，头也好痛，不是文上英文就是体育，办公室应用，教授迷人的声音引起言语，眼角放松悠悠在悠悠的生活没有悠悠，就一卡通。
换上整齐模样，展翅的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
参加学会了社团的、合唱的、啦啦的，一个一个玩。当上戏篮的、戏排的、戏帮了、戏会的，每天埋头苦干。早上是裸戏，晚上园艺，每个做戏，事团如意，见你不易。Let's go party， 我的左一站起去好了地。
妈妈说毕业后你到底想要干什么？我说我肯学肯做，也有属于我的天空。妈妈说你别傻了，老爸不是张忠谋。我捡起电话，压大了却让我有点痛。换上整齐模样，展翅的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
时间再痛，日子再过，我的人生不能如此怠惰。毕业后的生活会是如何？这个我也不好说，只是一定怀念啃妈妈的蒜泥白肉，或者小看期中、期末考试的那梅花座啊。人是儿女，且是儿女，再选的日子几天而已。我冥冥之中穿到结果，大方的勇敢学习。回头看好友的动态显示，忘记前女友的感伤愁思，记不起老师的完整名字，我们就一起到未来放肆。
换上整齐模样，展翅的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。展翅的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。上整齐模样，展翅的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家。抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
上起床刷了刷牙，衣服还没换，吹吹头发拍了脸颊。阿看已经9点半，拔起手机上了速梯，戴起耳机调整捷运。我飞奔冲过狗洞，坐上拥挤的电梯。咱们每天早八都在夜曲，都夜好痛，不是文上英文就是体育。办公室应用，教授迷人的声音引起言语，眼角放松悠悠在悠悠的生活没有悠悠，就一卡通。
换上整齐模样，正直的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
参加学会了社团的、合唱的、啦啦的，一个一个玩。当上戏篮的、戏排的、戏帮了、戏会的，每天埋头苦干。早上是裸戏，晚上园艺，每日做戏，事团如意，见你不易。Let's go party， 我的桌椅上继续好了你。
妈妈说毕业后你到底想要干什么？我说我跟谁跟作业有属于我的天空。妈妈说你别傻的，老爸不是张忠谋。我接起电话，你还打来说的让我有点痛。换上整齐模样，正直的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
时间再痛，日子再过，我的人生不能如此怠惰。毕业后的生活会是如何？这个我也不好说，只是一点怀念啃妈妈的蒜泥白肉，或者小看期中、期末考试的那梅花座。人是儿女，妻是儿女，在学的日子几天而已。我冥冥之中穿到结火，大方的勇敢学习。回头看好友的动态显示，忘记前女友的感伤愁思，记不起老师的完整名字，我们就一起等未来放肆。
换上整齐模样，正直的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。换上整齐模样，正直的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。换上整齐模样，正直的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
早上起床刷了刷牙，衣服还没换，吹吹头发拍了脸颊。阿看已经9点半，拔起手机上了速梯，戴起耳机调整捷运。我飞奔冲过狗洞，坐上拥挤的电梯。咱们每天早八都在夜曲，都夜好痛，不是文上英文就是体育。办公室应用，教授迷人的声音引起言语，眼角放松悠悠在悠悠的生活没有悠悠，就一卡通。
换上真心模样，真实的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
参加学会了社团的、合唱的、啦啦的，一个一个玩。当上戏篮的、戏排的、戏棒的、戏会的，每天埋头苦干。早上是裸戏，晚上园艺，每日做戏，事团如一，见你不易。Let's go party， 我的左一站起去好了地。
妈妈说毕业后你到底想要干什么？我说我跟谁跟作业有属于我的天空。妈妈说你别傻了，老爸不是张忠谋。我捡起电话，你打来却让我有点痛。换上真心模样，真实的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
时间再痛，日子再过，我的人生不能如此怠惰。毕业后的生活会是如何？这个我也不好说，只是一定怀念啃妈妈的蒜泥白肉，或者小看期中、期末考试的那梅花座啊。人是儿女，且是儿女，再选的日子几天而已。我冥冥之中传到结果，大方的勇敢学习。回头看好友的动态显示，忘记前女友的感伤愁思，记不起老师的完整名字，我们就一起到未来放肆。
换上真心模样，真实的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。换上真心模样，真实的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。换上真心模样，真挚的我们就要。
这个就可以不要用了。Okay, Slido, please download the app and the code number.
卡是几 G 啊？这张卡是几 G？
Hello everyone. Please download Slido.com and the phone number and prepare your questions. We will have a Q&A for the whole session. Thank you. No speech. That's your opportunity. Yeah. Hello everyone. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I am Amy Shea, teacher of Journalism and Mass Communication program in MCU. Yeah. Today we are very honored and pleasure to have our digital minister Audrey Tang here. Yeah, everybody knows she is a genius hacker. The superstar in our government, with also the youngest digital minister with an IQ of 180. Yeah, she founded her own business at the age of 16 and retired at 33. She learns everything by her own self. Yeah, she becomes a role model of young generation. Yeah, I think it's our great honor to have her here. And international media from such as Japan, South Korea, Germany, and France, and the US praise Audrey Tang for her effort on preventing COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. Our Vice President Chen Jianren praised her as a key figure of Taiwan's epidemic COVID-19 prevention team. Yeah. So many journalists would like to ask her about what's Taiwan's model in preventing COVID-19 pandemic. Now it's your opportunity, your turn. Yeah. Let's welcome our digital minister, Audrey Tang. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have like an hour or something, actually just 15 minutes. And so my talk will be crowdsourced, meaning that you will help me to curate the agenda. So if you can scan the QR code, that would be best. If you somehow cannot scan the QR code, if you're using a laptop, you can also go to slido.com and enter 00518 without a pound sign. Whether it's by scanning QR code or by entering slido.com 00518, you get into this chat room-ish thing where people can ask me any question. And also, more importantly, you can like each other's questions. So the question with the most number of like will float to the top. And at the moment, the top is just 2 likes. And so I would encourage you to like each other more, I guess. Sorry, like each other's questions more. And see if we can get more questions here. So for the next 15 minutes, I'll just begin from the top. And if any of you would like to ask additional questions as part of my answer, you can raise your hand and start speaking at any given time. The speaking always has a higher priority than the Slido. So that's the time structure, if that's okay with you folks. Okay, it's okay. All right, so let's get started. Right, so 6 people would like to know this question posed by Natalia. Quote, how do you prevent disinformation campaign from interfering with your work? First of all, I would like to share this very simple idea called the basic transmission rate, or R0. I'm sure that all of you probably have heard of this important number by now. That is to say, if you receive a virus, how many more people a person who received the virus will infect. If the R0 value is under 1, it means that it would not become an epidemic because it was just taper off. And if it is above 1, it means that on average every person spread to more than one person, and then it will gradually grow exponentially. And so we basically use the same public health metaphor in order to look at the disinformation crisis. Now, in Taiwan, we have a pretty narrow definition of disinformation. It's a legal definition, and it's called intentional untruth that harms the public. Not just the image of a minister, which may just be good journalism, but harming the public's health. And that is the kind of thing that we look into how to counter in a rapid fashion. And when you analyze that, you will find that most of the information that goes viral, meaning that it goes online in a R0 value that's larger than 1, probably all have the same emotional content. I'll just use a couple of examples. For example, here's an example here. All right. So there was this disinformation campaign in January, I think. So around the voting time, and it started going viral just the day before the election. And it says the CIA, it's always the CIA, made 2 special invisible ink for ballots. So if you vote for Dr. Tsai, your ink will stay. But if you vote for the other 2 candidates, your ink will disappear. And if you vote for other candidates, there will be an invisible ballot count for Dr. Tsai, which will magically appear so that everybody will end up voting for Dr. Tsai, regardless of who you actually voted. And now this goes viral partly because it appeals to the emotion of outrage. If people see a conspiracy theory like this and they bought into it before they have even the time to fact check or to think through how would that even chemically work, they will tend to spread to a few people. And after they realize that there's no this could chemically work, it is already too late because it's already infected more than 1 person, and that's why it goes viral. And so the way we counter it is through radical transparency, essentially inviting YouTubers to live stream the counting process. So if you're here during the election, you'll probably see quite a few YouTubers just having this kind of cameras, and the people who count the ballots just put it up high so that the YouTubers with all sorts of different cameras, just like we have, 5 cameras here, can see all the different angles, can see the counting process. So it naturally made this clarification, transparency, much more viral than the disinformation. So another example, there was, again, this appeals to panic buying. So there was a rumor this February that says masks cannot be bought with money now. So a certain manufacturer sponsored 2,000 boxes of masks. You can, by commenting and sharing this social media post, receive a box of medical masks for free. And this appeals, of course, to people's uncertainty about the mask supply at the time. Of course, nobody who comment and share this receive any mask. They receive instead computer virus. But it very successfully have a R0 value that's above 1, because on average, everybody who fall victim to this would infect more than 1 friend of them to click share on the social media post. And so in a couple of days, we rolled out a radical transparency plan that renders this disinformation useless, because we published as open data all the real-time availability information of all the masks in supply in your nearby pharmacies. So everybody can see as a fact which pharmacist has how many. Whenever you see there's a rumor, find a humorous way to dispel that rumor so that the rumor's virality will be below 1. So that's the basic idea. There's quite a few other examples I can give, but let's go on to the next one. So Chanel Monroe would like to know how can Taiwan, and more specifically the Digital Ministry, help Taiwan's allies in developing its ICT technical skills to fight COVID-19? Excellent question. So the mask map that I just showed actually is now used more in South Korea than in Taiwan, because there's almost no queuing now. You just go to a random nearby pharmacy or nearby convenience store which open 24 hours, and you're probably guaranteed to have sufficient medical masks in supply. But South Korea, having nationalized the mask economy slightly later than we do, a month later than we do, still have need to use the mask map. And so very interestingly, if you go to the mask map, the top one, this one with a lot of triangles, it's written by someone with a nickname Kiang or Jiang Mingzong in Tainan. So whenever I open it, it focuses in Tainan, right? And this shows our real-time availability, updated every 3 minutes. And despite knowing no Korean language, Kiang's implementation, this particular map, is actually the first map that is provided to the South Korean people when they started mask rationing. And so this tells us two things. First is that the open source community knows no boundaries. Anybody who donates their code, that is to say their algorithms and the way that the process works, to the commons, that is to say relinquishing most of the copyright, can be taken up by any other jurisdictions. It doesn't need to have a authorization, a MOU, a licensing ceremony or anything like that. If this is useful, people will discover it and people will use it. So this is the transmission part. But there's also the mutation part. So if it's a good idea, chances are that people will want to adapt that to its particular circumstances. So this is the Tokyo dashboard. This is in collaboration with their civic technology community, the Code for Japan. And very quickly, people saw that this is actually a much better visualization than the ones that were in place. I used a lot of PDF files and tables and so on. And so people in Korea as well as in Taiwan started to translate it. So you can very easily see a Taiwanese Mandarin translation or an English translation and things like that. And so on GitHub, you can just look at this octocat and see that how many versions there are, and you will see that there's almost 2,000 versions, and each version gives it a little bit difference and changes it a little bit. For example, my version changes the 简体中文 the T here, this single character from its original kind of simplified strokes into its original shape, and that's the only thing, literally the only thing that I changed in my branch. But when I changed that branch, then the Code for Japan people very quickly merged it in so that you can see this now reflected in all the different versions of this dashboard. And then a city councilor noticed that and thanked me, and then that triggered the mayor of Tokyo noticing that and thanking me on Twitter. And so again, this is not track 2 diplomacy or the third sector now. We call it the social sector and the civic technology community. It just so happened that one of the civic technologists happens to be Taiwan's digital minister. But my proposal gets included by its merit, not because I'm Taiwan's digital minister. This is not your traditional track 1 diplomacy. This is because this contribution actually makes sense and also makes it much more easily for the different jurisdictions to start comparing oranges to oranges in terms of evaluating, for example, whether to reopen the borders and things like that. We really require the same degree of transparency and accountability so that we can calculate the risk factors involved. And so this is very important diplomatically, but this collaboration is not done by a diplomatic channel. Rather, this is by people collaborating in the open, through the open innovation ecosystem. And so this South Korean and Japanese collaboration mindset and essential work is also data-driven risk communication. And so a lot of people across the world proposed different digital systems here, and we use a novel voting mechanism to look at. And this is important because different societies have different norms. And it's important to look at the society's different norms and then settle on the common values that makes sense for all the different societies and different norms. For example, one of the US proposals from the US side used to be that we need to build an AI tool for the ICU, for the intensive care unit, so that if they get swamped with people going to the ICU, instead of admitting them on a first come, first served basis, we should evaluate their remaining life contribution potential to the society and take care of the people with higher remaining life potential. And this is illegal in Taiwan. Taiwan actually has a law that explicitly forbids this kind of evaluation. So our National Development Council Regulatory Reform Unit actually did a red light, yellow light, green light to each and every crowdsourced proposals, so that people can see that we need to focus on the things that has no legal disputes, or at least agree with the local norm, but can be interpreted to be within the legal norm, instead of spending time to work on the things that are both violating the social norm and is actually downright illegal. And this is also important. Otherwise, the society's norm may gradually change because of the epidemic. But that is what we want to conserve. We want to be still a liberal democracy, and we have never in Taiwan declared an emergency situation. So everything we do needs to still be constitutional and within the rule of law, and giving a accountable a scientific reason also of why we do such things. And so the 5 winning teams will be announced later today. And so I would encourage you to look at what they have to offer. And they also offer their source code under open source licenses, meaning that they relinquish most of their copyright, including for commercial purposes. So if you're interested in coding or in design, you can also take their idea and run with it and see if it can also help to assist your country in developing the ICT technical skills. This is all just Taiwan can help. This is not about charging any license fees or trademark fees. So 5 people would like to know, how does the digital ministry help Taiwan achieve its sustainable development goals? Excellent question. So we again have any number of hackathons, and so this is the presidential hackathon. The co-hack is kind of a fast-tracked one within the presidential hackathon. Both are run by the Board of Science and Technology, but the presidential hackathon is much more, it encompasses pretty much everything. So these are the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, and each proposal in the presidential hackathon need to correspond to one or more of the specific goals in the SDGs, so that people can look at the SDGs and the more than 200 proposals in it, and choose the ones that make sense to them. And we use a novel voting method called quadratic voting that makes sure that people don't get mobilized to vote just one thing, but rather can evaluate the synergies between the Sustainable Development Goals. And so just a few examples of the previous winners of the presidential hackathon. So each presidential hackathon each year chooses 5 teams. And for example, there was a team called the Water Savior, because they save water. And this is a Taiwan Water Corporation. They employ a lot of people who listen to the pipes for leaks. And if it's not leaking, they go on to listen to the next part of the pipeline. And if they do leak, then they become creative and start finding solutions to the leaks. Now, they partnered 2 years ago with a bunch of machine learning experts, so that they train a kind of apprentice chatbot, so that the skills persons can wake up and on the chatbot on the line platform look at the 3 most likely leaking places near them, and so they spend their time fixing those leaks rather than discovering the places that are not leaking, which is a very trivial kind of work and do not actually recruit very well for young people to join. But in any case, the young people are now much more willing to join, because most of their time is spending doing creative endeavor instead of listening to pipes that are not leaking. And so just this very simple idea, they correspond to one sustainable goal, that is to say the target 6.4, increase water use efficiency and ensure fresh water supplies. So they receive a trophy from our president. Now there is no money, no monetary reward in the presidential hackathon. Rather, this trophy, which is the shape of Taiwan, I guess I need to draw the shape a little bit more Taiwan-like. I guess I'm never very good at drawing that sort of shape. Still nothing like Taiwan, but anyway, more like an ice cream or something. But anyway, so the important part is this micro-projector underneath it. If you turn on the micro-projector, then it shows Dr. Tsai Ing-wen handing the trophy to you. And so this is self-descriptory trophy. And it basically says that the president promises whatever you have prototyped in the past 3 months, according to the Sustainable Development Goals, we're committed to realize whatever you're doing in the next 12 years. 12 months, next 1 year as part of the national policy. And so no matter whether it is about fixing the water pipes leaks or to build data collaboratives to measure the air and also now water quality together and so on, every year we have hundreds of cases that proposes to make a cross-sectoral data collaborative that makes people trust each other more and realize the SDGs more. And this by itself is a sustainable development goal. This is education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Just by measuring your balcony or your school's PM 2.5 air quality value and writing it into a distributed ledger, this actually increases people's awareness that we're collectively responsible for the data collection work that can shape our environmental policies together. And because the environment minister at the time of that proposal only had less than 100 measurement stations, and the civil society already have more than 2,000, and in Taiwan we cannot censor them, right? So we cannot beat them, we must join them. And so they negotiated with the environment minister, allowing the government to support but not control their monitoring network to calibrate its sensitivity and so on. And they negotiated so that the government will help fill in the gaps. The gaps are usually industrial parks that are private property. They can't break into and install airboxes there. But it turns out that the public sector owns the land in the industrial park. And so we can basically take their micro sensor design and put it on the lamp and then complete the picture together. And so all of this says that all the industrial park development, and for example, this one is about plants, agricultural plants, and how it cannot be influenced by pollutions by the industrial plants near the arable lands. And again, this is a microsensor that you could just put on the irrigation pathway, and it would just automatically calculate the pollution level of the 3 most common pollutants and write it through the NB-IoT or other zero-G network into a distributed ledger, so that everybody who is a farmer can just very cheaply get those boxes and measure the upstream pollution. And the upstream manufacturers, if they are not polluting, they will also be incentivized to get a few of such cheap boxes and prove that it's even upstream that has pollution, because we have passed a law that anyone who on arable land pollutes the plants, they will get their electricity and their water supply cut by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And so this again is a very important way to build sustainability right into the kind of fabric of the society. Now the voting method is also very interesting. Everybody gets 99 points if they have joined the GOV.tw, the participation platform account. There's more than 10 million visitors out of 23 million residents in Taiwan, and everybody received 99 points. And if you like this idea a lot, you can vote for 1 vote, which costs 1 point, 2 votes, which costs 4 points, 3 votes, which costs 9 points, up to 9 votes, which costs 81 points, because you only have 99. After voting for 9 votes, you still have 18 left, but you cannot cast the 10th vote, because that would be costing 100, and nobody has 100. So people will be prompted to look into other more interesting or equally interesting ideas and spend the 18 points maybe voting for 4, which costs 16, and people are then motivated to look at the other 2 because people don't want to squander their votes, and then maybe they take some of the original 9 back and do a 7 and 7 and so on. And so on average, each project, instead of receiving all of the 9 votes, on average, people just do a 7 and 7 or a 4 and 4 and things like that. On average, people vote for more than 4 projects. And the important result is that when we announce the top 20, everybody will feel that they have won, almost everybody. Instead of if they over-concentrate, then almost everybody will feel they have lost when we announce the top 20. So this is also a way way using mechanism design to build the social consensus. So presidential hackathon is one of the primary ways, because if they win the presidential hackathon, even if by realizing sustainable goals they break some existing laws or they require a lot of extra budget or so on, they have their presidential promise that this will happen, and they will be much more able to convince their ministers to change the laws and things like that. If they say, oh, we cannot do that, we cannot using pure teleconference to get special doctors to look at the offshore islands nurses cases, they previously always require a fly via the helicopter to the main Taiwan island for treatment of serious cases and major trauma. But through the presidential hackathon, they proved that the local people will be much more happy if the nurses locally can talk with the specialized doctors, and the local nurses and doctors also learn more because they will be able to treat these issues through the instructions from the people who are in the main Taiwan island. And so because it's such a good idea, even if it's not legal by the law of doctors at that time, the legislation very quickly pushed through an amendment that made this legal. And so this is the political binding power is one of the primary ways that we realize the SDGs through this kind of annual crowdsourcing. So 8 people would like to know, do I think social enterprises will be a booming industry in Taiwan in the next 10 years, and why? Yes, certainly. Because in Taiwan, we already now say that whenever you're developing for economy, not only you need to prove that you're not causing environmental and social harm, which would be a company's social responsibility, but rather we much prefer people to focus, for example, on circular economy and eco-design, that is to say it can deliver environmental value, being carbon neutral or even negative carbon when they promote the good jobs and economic growth. That is to say, we now deliver much of the values by proving that it's not a either-or thing. This is not a zero-sum thing, but rather by, for example, banning the plastic straws of our national identity drink, bubble tea, in takeouts. That's by itself a crowdsourced proposal. People brainstorm on all sorts of different ways, not only the obvious solutions such as a transparent glass-based straw, but rather using agric materials that used to be exhaust or garbage, but they can transform these organic materials in a low or even negative carbon way into reusable straws. And a lot of new designs out of this circular economy trend makes people's preferential shopping, or what we call buying power, a very serious incentive for the businesses to start developing an eco-friendly way. Previously, the businesses know that if they put the food safety in danger, put environmental safety in danger, people in Taiwan will do a social sanction, and the social sanction is very serious, right? It can just take down pretty much any company. But now, a lot more companies are using crowdfunding platforms, such as Flying Bee or Zozo, to advertise their pro-social and pro-environment lines, and even though it may have a higher initial cost because it requires research and development, people are willing to burden themselves with some of this initial research and development costs by participating in crowdfunding, and we see a clear growth in these areas, specifically around circular economy, but also about, for example, the life under ocean, or a clean water and sanitation, mitigating against climate change and things like that. These are all pretty good topics when it comes to crowdfunding. So I think it will not only be a booming industry, it will change the industrial norm. For public listed companies, there's already a majority of them are now, instead of writing a purely CSR report, they are now writing a sustainability strategy report using the international GRI standards. And in the coming years, we will probably see that because the know-how gets more widely known by the accountants and by the people doing those GRI reports, even small to medium enterprises will find it to their advantage to do the same thing as a publicly listed company did, which is to prove that the more business that you do with them, the more environmental and social value do they deliver. So if you want to look at the 400 or so early adopters to this idea, you can look into social innovation platform si.taiwan.gov.tw, which lists exactly which registered organizations in which sustainable development goals, which years they're registering, what issues they're solving, and the challenges locally that they're looking at. And you can also look at nearby vicinities and see which SDGs gets a focus by the local voluntary national reviews and local voluntary local reviews of that municipality and so on. And so each municipality will also develop its own SDG strategy to announce to the entrepreneurs working on those issues that they would then absorb much of the risk if they try out a few different things and fail, and pivot to other things. And the municipality will absorb most of the cost because they will be aligning to whatever the municipality's SDG targets are, and everything that they learned will be very informative to the policymakers in that municipality. And so that is why I think it is not just women, it's redefining the industry. So people would like to know what are some examples of global partnerships that Taiwan have. Excellent question. So like in the Open Government Partnership, which is a global organization with more than, I think, 80 countries and many important civil society organizations such as Transparency International and so on. They open contracting partnership and so on. They work with us very closely so that in Taiwan we have a national action plan that is currently in the works that shares how exactly we're opening up each and every part of our government so that people can participate more widely in it. And this is called the National Action Plan of the Open Government Partnership. And the OGP is a very interesting place because I personally shared many keynotes and panels in the OGP. And the OGP, for example, this is when I shared the impact assessment co-creation process using gender impact assessment as a framework. Of course, this has this banner tweet, which is very appropriate now that we are in the anniversary of the marriage equality. But behind this is actually 12 years of very intensive open government work. And so I explained first that our national parliament's gender parity is pretty good. I was presenting in Canada, so I just used Canada and its nearby countries. I probably wouldn't have this slide if I presented the Nordic countries, but in any case, we're now above 30% women in the parliament, and we have a structure called a Gender Equality Committee that is by design one more seat of the civil society leaders than ministers, but most ministers are also part of the Gender Equality Committee, and each and every bills and projects, there's hundreds of them every year, gets measured by this gender impact assessment so that every ministries, every public servants have a theory of change of how their policies are going to change the gender equality landscape. And this measures not only the very top level, this is actually like number of volunteers, community development association members, labor force participation rate, all the way to civil servants in different levels and things like that. And every bill need to complete this assessment. For example, this one is from Ministry of Labor, that's how it solves the problem, even though it's ostensibly not related to gender, how it would actually influence the gender landscape when its policy goal become implemented, and how would re-employ women and foreign workers be implemented, and what are the consultation, the open government processes, and what are the benefits, and so on. And as soon as they declare that, those numbers are now then listed into the gender dashboard and constantly monitored, even long after this plan goes out of scope, out of its expiration year. So that means that we have a constantly monitored numbers of the human right impact, the civil and political right impact, and so on across all the different government sectors. So after 12 years of running this, all civil servants, even in the initially they would think it's unrelated issues such as finance or whatever other planning, they will link their main work with gender and proactively discover gender-related issues. And that is why as soon as the Constitutional Court did this ruling and the two referenda sets the solution scape, the civil servants immediately came up with the kind of very tiny solution space, came up with the perfect solution, so-called the hyperlink act, and also what I call 结婚不结姻, marrying the bylaws but not the in-laws, which is a marriage equality with Asian characteristics, and that then gets legalized because then it weds people together but not families together, and that very neatly satisfies both referenda and also the constitutional court and issues, and also marriage equality, and because they've never thought that it is possible to kind of shortcut the kinship and family system and change nothing on that part of the civil code, but everything of the bylaws, of the rights and obligations on the marriage part of the civil code. A lot of them are now explicitly modeling their campaigns after Taiwan's design. So I would say that this qualifies as a very important global partnership horizon, and really I think the process upon how the public servants discover the solution by themselves is as important as the activists and the legislators in this particular issue. So 9 people ask, how would the digital ministry help to prevent future hacks like the one that occurred on the presidential office over the weekend? Well, we do offer our secure communication channels. The Zoom issue, I'm not sure whether you know of that issue. It is basically when around February, Zoom originally said that each conference that took on the Zoom meeting platform will only be transmitted to the data centers within that particular region. They have this idea of geofencing, but they say that during February there was a spike in traffic, of course, because of coronavirus. So they mistakenly misconfigured so that no matter where you are in the world, there are some chances that your key exchange traffic will go to the PRC territories for some reason. But in any case, they say it's a configuration mistake. But it is explicitly violated their promise to their customers, and that is why our Department of Cybersecurity banned it. Banning it is not the problem, finding alternative. It is the problem because by that time, a lot of education facilities have settled on using Zoom for their communication and education. So in just, I think, that in 20 hours or so, I personally set up extended our offering of video conferencing from within originally only from my office and our extended network, the participatory officer network, and we work with the National Center of High-Speed Computing and start offering this GC Meet instance at meet.pdis.tw to pretty much everybody. So you can, any of you can use meet.pdis.tw for free and to immediately start setting up video conferences with one another and have the National Center of High-Speed Computing absorb most of the traffic and actually all the cost. This is completely free offering. And then we also work with the Department of Cybersecurity to do a penetration test, to do a security audit of the system to make sure that there is no vulnerabilities if you decide to switch to this from Zoom. And so basically what we do at the executive Yuan is just to try out these tools and do penetration testing and so on and improve its usability so that people can use it without feeling that they have to install an extra software, install an extra package, because every extra step decreases people's incentive to use these secure systems. So our main work is just to make this as convenient as the thing that is replacing, in this case, Zoom. And so that's our main contribution. But I'm really not in charge of cybersecurity of the presidential office. And what we can do is just to kind of nudge people, especially officials, to use this as convenient as insecure products, but more secure because it's cybersecurity tested and somehow change their behavior patterns. And this is not very easy. I mean, I personally have not used Line for official purpose for the past 4 years, but there's not many cabinet members that can say that because for each convenient but not very secure. I'm not saying that Line is insecure, I'm saying that the way that people use Line, confusing their family communication with with their official communication is not secure. But it's a hard habit to break. And so a lot of social engineering doesn't really need to get to the core of the cybersecurity system. You just need to kind of socially engineer, convince some person, for example, through free mask or whatever, for them to download something, and then voila, you have the access to their address book and things like that. So what we're doing is basically demonstrating a more cyber secure way of operating in the public sector, but at the end of the day, especially for higher level officials, it boils down to each and every one of them to wash their hands properly, to adhere to the good cybersecurity hygiene. So 10 people would like to know, is anything being done to make sure that the data being used in track and contain COVID is not also being used in a malicious way, or that it won't be in the future? Excellent question. So the digital fence, which you probably already have heard of, maybe some of your friends have been going through the digital fence that enforces the 14-day of self-quarantine or self-isolation, is the main part that is controversial in this technology against COVID, because in Taiwan during SARS, which is in 2003, people had to barricade an entire hospital, and it was very traumatic for everybody who remember that. That is to say, anyone who happens to be around at that time, anyone who's above 30 years old and was living in Taiwan at the time. And so the Constitutional Court, after SARS, took quite a few years in legislation, in debates, and so on, to try to figure out a proper way to rewrite our CDA, our Communicable Disease Act, to make sure that when SARS comes again, we don't have to barricade the hospital. Even though barricading the hospital is not ruled as unconstitutional, the Constitutional Court makes the request to the legislator so that they have to find something that has a fixed duration, that doesn't hamper the freedoms as much as a physical barricade, that it need to be clearly informed and not barricading unannounced and things like that. These are very important constraints. But so it authorized the CDA and therefore the CECC to implement now the digital fence, which is an alternate way than barricading people's homes. Rather, it uses the phone signals that people are addicted to their phones anyway, to make sure that they do not exceed the perimeter. And it doesn't use the GPS or any sort of kind of fine-grained details. It uses cell tower triangulation so that it has a resolution of maybe 50 meters across 50 meters. And so if you break out of that square, instead of, it doesn't know which room you're in, for example, then it triggers an SMS message to the local household managers and the police. And the important thing here is that it doesn't collect any new thing. The triangulation data, the signal strength data, the whereabouts of the phone basically is already tracked by the 5 telecoms. It's just that they, instead of using it to improve their service only or implement roaming or whatever, they instead use this as a notification system, but only during those 14 days. At the 15th day after you break out of the 14-day period, there's no constitutional basis to retain any of the data or to use any of the data. And so none of this is retained. Basically the usual, what we call log rotation, which is the deletion of the unnecessary monitoring of the data. So in those systems, all they track is the SMS numbers. And if the SSN numbers are given out by the government, of course, we also recycle those numbers because these are temporary phones provided for the people in quarantine. So again, there's no a kind of hard link relationship between that information and your personal identifiers after the quarantine is over. So a lot of it is very detailed, very technical, but precisely because not all people approve of this way of using cell phone information. Oh, somebody said I should talk more slowly. Okay, sure. So anyway, so what I'm trying to get to is that if people think that it is not a kosher way of using the data, that they will work with the MPs that have fears or uncertainty or doubt, and the MPs do ask the Department of Cybersecurity and so on, and the Zhonghua Telecom and so on, to the legislation to give an account of what exactly exactly is being retained and what exactly will be deleted and things like that. And so even though I think Minister Chen Shizhong by now have 94% approval rate, we need to remember that we owe the 6% a lot, because it's these 6% that keep us honest and accountable, because we've not declared a emergency situation. Literally every single administrative measure we take needs to be explained in terms of existing constitutional law system. So these 6% of people and the MPs that represent them that ask for a accountability for each and every new technological measures, that is the treasure of our constitutional liberal democracy, because without which it becomes a very arbitrary thing. So I think it will not be used in a malicious way, precisely because that we do not have 100% approval rates of the CECC. 10 people would like to know, being instrumental in Taiwan's coronavirus control efforts, what do I think is the most important thing to learn from other countries struggling with COVID-19? Excellent question. So for me, actually, the question that was just asked is really the most important question, because this changes the norm that we have around data. And you can either choose to have the civil society, as I showed, to monitor the data. We designed the system so that anyone can go to the pharmacy, swipe your NHI card, after a couple of minutes refresh the map or the chatbot, and then see its stock would deplete by 9 or by 10 if you're a child. And this is by design. Instead of having the government release the statistics or the audit reports at the end of the day or the end of the week, which would take away all the participatory power of the social sector, we release these numbers every 30 seconds at the beginning, and now it's not really queuing anymore, so we release every 3 minutes. But this near real-time release of open data shows enormous trust. We trust the citizens to not misuse these data, and we trust citizens to also inform us in policy making, in making sure that data controllership is joined by everybody in the society. So there's a lot of people who volunteer to build analysis systems that not only visualizes the growing of the supply, so everybody can see that there really is no need to panic buy anymore, that we do have sufficient supply, but they can also highlight, for example, the oversupply or undersupply of certain regions or certain activity patterns, like in certain municipalities where people, especially young people, work very long hours. They tend not to have time to go to the pharmacy, because by the time their work is over, all the pharmacies have closed. And for these people, we of course work with the 24-hour convenience stores and so on. So they are also collaborators in policy making. So this is what I call data collaboratives, or a social sector-led data policy. But in many other jurisdictions, something else is happening, right? People are trusting the state, a surveillance state adapt to own all the data without giving adequate explanation or the scientific basis of why the policies are made in such a way. And there is literally no way for people to validate whether it's true or not, right? So actually something very much like that is happening in Wuhan right now with their pervasive retesting. And people are questioning, for example, the efficacy of the testing equipment, the sequence of the retesting, the official numbers versus people's crowdsourced numbers and things like that. And usually it falls upon the journalism community to make sense of the various different news sources and have a single account of everything. And in Taiwan, we partner with the journalism community by essentially allowing them a lot of co-creation power. And, for example, asking the CECC what to do if a young boy refuses to go to school because all they have is pink medical mask, and that he will get bullied by his classmates. And the CECC the very next day puts on pink medical mask, and we see a lot of Facebook and other social media pages start switching, painting their logo pink. And then this is again gender mainstreaming, also important social innovation. So the journalism community knows that if they ask something that reflects a social discord or social tension or a disagreement versus one account like there's plenty of mass supply versus another account like if this pink is of no use, the CECC will take that into account and make policy changes or at least amplifying innovations in a way that is to the public benefit. So again, the agenda setting power relies firmly on the social sector and the journalism community. But if you don't have a strong and robust journalism community, then there's no one to keep the command centers honest, and then there will be a lot more power invested into the centralized state, and then say surveillance becomes a norm. Of course, there are also certain jurisdictions that are saying, neither the social sector or the state is strong enough. We need to believe in multinational companies and the economic sector. That is, of course, one possible way out as well. But whether it's social sector, economic sector, or the state taking the initiative of data controllership, that would probably shape the norm of data retention and data policy for years, if not decades, after the coronavirus. So I think this is the most important thing to learn from Taiwan, is that it is possible to make the democracy function even more deeply and make the people's sense of polity and supporting each other even more strong, even during a pandemic, and not at expense of the civil society and the essential liberties. So 8 people would like to ask, the Digital Ministry has done a good job of preventing COVID-19 infodemic with misinformation. How was this done? This is good question, and with 3 minutes, probably the last question that I'll answer. So again, I talk about humor over rumor, and this is important both in the delivery of the information, because it needs to be very informative and succinct, and also packaging of the information, meaning that it needs to be genuinely very funny. So another example is this one, which is my favorite example. So our premier, Su Zhenchang, laughing happily in this shot, now showed his bottom, wiggling it a little bit, and with this very large title that says, we only have 1 pair of Botox each. Right. So, and this entire package is shaped like a tissue paper box, you'll notice. And this info box shows that because there was panic buying of tissue papers at that time, the rumor, the trending rumor at that time was that because we're ramping up production of medical masks from 1.8 million a day to 18 million a day, we've passed that point, by the way. We're almost 20 million a day now. So because we're ramping up production a lot, it will use a lot of materials. And the materials, the so the rumor says, are the same as the one that's being used to do tissue paper production. So because tissue paper is the same material, so it will soon run out of tissue papers. That's the payload of the rumor. And of course, the clarification says that the tissue paper material came from South America, and medical mask material come domestically. So there's no way that ramping up production of this will influence the supply of that. But if we just publish this table, it will not have a good Arnold value, and people will see the rumor much more frequently than this clarification. So the humorous packaging is very important, because people who have seen the premier wiggling his buttons will not easily unsee that. And so when you see the rumor afterwards, you will just laugh at it. You will not feel outraged. And because the same kind of psychological potential for being upset and willing to share something could be channeled to outrage, or it could be channeled to humor. But these two channels are mutually exclusive. If you feel strongly outraged, there's no way to feel humor. And if you already laughed about it, there's no way to feel outrage. And so after this very humorous packaging, actually we noticed that the original rumor just died down in a couple of days, and people don't panic buy tissue paper way more. And there's also this part that says that if you spread this disinformation intentionally to cause public harm, there is actually counter-disinformation law already in place. So we found out that the person who spread this disinformation the first time was the tissue paper reseller. So in conclusion, I think humor over rumor relies on a creative social sector that can take each and every CECC spokesdog meme. For example, this is about social distancing. Indoor, 3 dogs. Outdoor, 2 dogs. Remember to cover your mouth and nose when sneezing, not doing those things. And do not eat your hands during the coronavirus pandemic, and also remember to pre-order your masks. And so all this show the creativity of the civil society, and people do love this Zongchai or Doga CEO, and we see that people across all the different age groups do their own secondary and tertiary recreations, remixes using those Doga memes, so that everybody now know how to wash their hands properly and how to measure social distance. And so I would encourage you to also help, I guess, in spreading the humor. Whenever you see a rumor or something that appears to outrage, think about how you can transform it into a more pro-social way, so we have a pro-social media rather than anti-social media. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Audrey Tang gave us many wonderful and interesting examples. Let's thank her. She must leave by 2:40. Thank you.
Thank you.
We take a short break, 10 minutes, and then come back for our class. I will say.
Someone keeps putting questions like, what's your social?
换上真情模样，真挚的我们就要飞翔，梦想在远方，但我从不害怕。或许偶尔会受伤，或许偶尔还会想家，抬起头，我的朋友啊，一起走吧。
早上起床刷